Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona for a preview of one of the big races this weekend at Kentucky Downs. Let's take a look at race 7. This is the Music City, another race with a $2 million purse. David, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pounce as the favorite, but after Pounce, there could be 4 or 5 other horses all in that 5 to 1-ish range. It does seem like it's a really competitive field here.
Yeah, it's a highly competitive race. Pounce is coming off that impressive victory last time in the Lake George, but there are others that are coming into this race in good form. An interesting distance for a lot of these fillies to try, the 6.5 furlongs, because some have been going shorter, some have been going longer. So not really a specialist distance for too many in this field, and I think that creates a layer of uncertainty.
And as we take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, I think one thing that's real key is there shouldn't be that much early speed in here. And Timeform US has Pipsy up towards the front end, but I don't think that will be the case in here, David, because a lot of times you have to read intent. Pipsy went longer and was able to show speed going long. I think at the sprint distance, they're going to want to be more mid-pack or more of a closer with Pipsy. I wouldn't be shocked to see Time to Dazzle out front, cutting back from that mile. And that could be a very important factor for Time to Dazzle, cutting back, having some fitness, and still being able to get close to what looks like a pretty slow early pace.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how this plays out on the front end between these two likely speeds. I think they'd be smart to go forward with Time to Dazzle because that has how she's had her success and her victories. She's gone forward in those races. We saw that last time in the Ontario Colleen. I do think Pipsy has more early speed than it looks like from her 2 American starts. I think we'll talk more about that when we get to her, but I think it is going to be a jockey's decision as to how they break from the gate. That obviously was an issue for Pipsy to back.
And she's one of those, as we get to the field, by default, she might naturally be quicker than so many of these, where it's just going to put her a lot closer to the front end. Let's start with Crown Imperial as we go through this field, horse by horse. The number 1 seems like one of the bigger long shots in the field. Won the Intappable Stakes last year, David, at 6.5, beating Buttercream Babe. But since then, she's just not been that competitive. I think she's only hit the board twice in the last 6 starts.
Yeah, she's cutting back to a sprint. Last time she went the 5.5 furlongs. Now she's getting back to the same 6.5 furlong distance that she won over in the Untappable last year at Kentucky Downs. I think this is probably the right kind of trip for her in terms of the distance being what she prefers. I just wish I liked her overall form a little bit more coming into this race. I think she'd have to improve.
The 2 Carry You feels like a horse that 6.5 at Kentucky could be a pretty solid distance for her, because going 5.5 might have been a little short for her. We saw her going 6 furlongs in the Soaring Softly a couple starts back when she was behind Pipsy. Thought she was a very good second that day. She's not all that fast early, which could sometimes hurt her and just impact her compared to some of her other rivals. But I feel like the trip and this distance should work out well for her. I have her as at least an under type horse in here.
Yeah, she's a nice horse. She's run well in each of her last 2 starts, and Cherie DeVaux has cut her back to sprint distances, which is what she showed she liked when she was racing in Europe last year. She didn't run that badly behind Pipsy, too, back in the Soaring Softly. I know Pipsy had some trouble that everybody noticed at the start of that race, but Carey U was in some traffic through the stretch and made a nice late run. And last time out in the Coronation Cup, I didn't think she was ever getting to the winner Twirling Queen, who I think everybody in the main body of this field is happy to see relegated 3 deep to the AE list. And she's probably not going to get into this race, but she would be a major contender if she did. I don't think Carey was ever beating that horse, but she still ran on decently for second. And I agree, the 6.5 could work for her here.
Group 3 winner in Ireland back in 2023. Time to Dazzle feels like one of the major speeds in here, and cutting back from a mile, that could really be key. She's going to go second, start off the 4.5-month layoff. She's a grade 3 winner on the turf. She just doesn't really want to be held. She feels like kind of a quirky horse to ride, David, because you watch and she's like naturally going fast, but the riders are trying to save a little something. This is another one that, like here or maybe down the hill at Santa Anita, where you could just let a horse like this loose and just really let him run. I'm expecting her to run well and be forwardly placed, and I think she'll be in the mix in here.
Yeah, she does seem tough to ride. We'll take a look at her most recent victory in the Ontario Colleen, where, like you said, she just went to the front end. It seemed like Sahim Savachi was actually trying to restrain her through the early stages, and she just wanted to run away from this field, and she kept opening up, and as soon as they gave her her head, she just went clear and never let anybody get close to her. She got some crazy trips, 2 and 3 back at Gulfstream in the Ginger Brew and the Here Comes the Bride. Joe Bravo seemed intent on trying to make her rate in those races, and she wanted absolutely no part of it and was legitimately 4 to 5 wide around the turns in those races, which I think we know is not a winning trip at Gulfstream Park. So she's a lot better than those races. Can she run back to the most recent effort going a mile? Well, maybe, because there's not a whole lot of speed in here, and she's supposed to be clear of these in front early, and maybe that just makes her too tough for this field to catch.
One of the other horses that could be forward is the number 4, Pipsy, who ran really well in the Soaring Softly and missed the break that day. So Pipsy is not that slow, was right on the front end going longer, and actually showed more speed, David, as you were pointing out, in some of her earlier races over in Ireland before coming to the US. So in this field against a group like this, she should, by process of elimination, just kind of by default, be a lot more forwardly placed here.
Yeah, she was a speed horse in Europe as a 2-year-old. She would just kind of roll along on the front end and run her competition into the ground. So it was pretty surprising in her US debut to see her able to adapt to coming from as far back off the pace as she did after that disastrous start. This race did fall apart a little bit at the end, but she was still really firing through the stretch of this race to get up, beating KRU, who we already talked about. They tried the mile in her next start. It just seemed like she wanted no part of that distance. And that was also a race where the pace came apart a little bit. It was won by a deep closer. I think they're getting back to the right kind of race for her, the 6.5 furlongs. And without a whole lot of speed signed on, if she breaks well, I do think she's going to be prominent early. And she's shown ability for trainer William Walton, who is having a pretty strong summer so far.
Visually won grade 3 at Santa Anita back in May, going 6.5 down the hill, which plays similar to this. So the trip wise, it could work out well for her. I just wonder how good she is, David, against a group like this. Visually is 30-1 up on the morning line.
Yeah, like I said, she's got the victory going the distance, but I think that came against somewhat weaker competition out in California. And her recent form just makes her a little tough to like in this race. She doesn't have a whole lot of speed. I wonder how the projected race flow is going to work in her favor, and she might just be a little overmatched.
Amidst Waves won 3 of her first 4 races, but 0 for the last 4 since. And she just doesn't really seem like she's progressed or gotten all that faster at 3 years old. Does have some success at shorter races also. So I'm not sure if the 6.5 at Kentucky, which plays a little longer, is going to be up to her liking, because she's the one that I would prefer at maybe a 5.5 furlong style turf course. Any thoughts on Amidst Waves in here?
She just feels like a horse that was really precocious as a 2-year-old, took advantage of some stake situations when she could, winning a few stakes in a row last year, but she just hasn't really gone on. It doesn't seem like she's developed physically, hasn't developed in her speed figures. She's been getting outworked this summer by a 2-year-old at Saratoga, which is typically not a good sign for a 3-year-old filly. So she wasn't for me in this spot.
Pharaoh's Wine wired a group that she was just much better than last time out. She was a heavy favorite. They put her on the front end. She is grade 2 placed. I just like others more. She's another that's going to have to run a lot faster to kind of get competitive with this group.
Yeah, I just don't know if she really wants to sprint. They've primarily gone longer with her in her career, and I think she'd actually have to improve turning back to sprint. And visually, I also didn't like the way she was drifting out through the stretch of her last race. She was just better than those horses, but she was supposed to win by 3 lengths, and then just kind of, was her own worst enemy, losing focus, approaching the wire. Don't want to see that as a horse steps up in class.
Buttercream Babe, Philly faced the boys in the Hall of Fame on August the 2nd at Saratoga. And this happens to us sometimes as horse players, David. I played her that day, and her trip was just a little less than optimal. She was sitting in a really good spot, and she kind of got pushed back a little down inside. And then Irad had to make a decision, go to the outside or stay inside. And it's a split-second decision, and it's a 50-50 decision a lot of the time. He went to the outside. There was no room. He had to kind of alter back inside, and that may have been the difference between winning and losing a race where he was only beat about a half length that day. So maybe it's the jilted horse player in me that had her last time and wants to come back and give her another shot in here. I think she fits well with this group after facing the boys last time out. And what's a positive? She ran well last year here at 6.5. So we know she can get this layout very well. What are your thoughts on Buttercream Babe in here?
Yeah, I don't really disagree with anything you said about the trip last time. Maybe if she'd been able to find that clear path in upper stretch, she might have narrowly won that race. She was only beaten by half a length. She did have to alter course a little bit. It still was a very good trip up until the quarter pole. So I don't want to, upgrade her too much off that minor trouble in the stretch last time. But she's a horse who, like you said, she's been in good form. She can handle going a little bit shorter. I just think she fits this race really well, and she's got good versatility to her running style where they can place her close to the pace, or if more pace develops, she's also comfortable rallying from further back.
Pounce With that versatility, the fact that she's shown some tactical speed, and just that she's shown up with some big efforts multiple times. We've seen really big efforts from her, David. So looking at this race, I feel like her ceiling, one of the higher in here, you probably won't be able to get a whole lot of value on her from the win end. But with this group, when she shows up with one of her better efforts, she's just been really good.
Yeah, she was excellent last time, beating a very nice field in the Lake George. You could argue maybe even a slightly tougher field than she's facing in this Music City. The big question for her is going to be the turn back in distance to the 6.5. She did win her debut on the dirt going a sprint distance as a 2-year-old, so she should have the speed to handle it. And she seems like the kind of horse that really does top out at the mile. She's a horse that sometimes has gotten trips that have her use her stamina a little bit too early in races and is left with nothing for the finish. So I do think she is a good candidate to handle the turn back in distance. She's just coming in with totally exposed form after getting a good trip last time. And she's got a jockey on board, Dylan Davis, who had a fantastic summer at Saratoga, but isn't too familiar with this Kentucky Downs course. So I wonder how that's going to play into her price and the trip that she gets.
Simply in front. It was one of the tougher reads in here for me. She's multiple graded stakes placed at a mile on turf, but I just don't think she's quite fast enough in here or has run enough good enough races for me to get really excited about her with a group like this. How do you think Simply in front stacks up?
Yeah, she was just no match for Time to Dazzle last time, and that one kind of ran off on the front end. And Simply in Front was trying through the stretch, but just could never really get close to her. She's going to try to turn back. I don't really see a ton of evidence in her form to say that she's supposed to get better going the 6.5 furlongs, and she does feel like a horse that needs to take a step forward to beat some of these.
Regulatory Risk will try the turf for the first time, and the dam never tried turf. When you're looking at the dam side, the 6 direct siblings, David, I think all combined out of 95 starts to only race once on the turf. So we don't really have a whole lot of sample size there for grass. And it almost feels like a horse that they're just kind of trying something and sort of throwing a dart and seeing if that can maybe improve her a little bit coming off of a couple lackluster efforts.
It's a very strange spot for Chad Brown to run this horse, who was third in the Kentucky Oaks, now trying this 6.5 furlong turf race. Chad Brown, I should say, does not run very many horses at Kentucky Downs, especially in the stakes races over the past 5 years. He's just 2 for 14 in stakes at Kentucky Downs, so doesn't have a whole lot of success and doesn't do it that often, and also doesn't try the turf for the first time with horses like this in many situations. Like you said, there's not a whole lot of pedigree, and I think she'd have to get a little faster to compete with these. She's not for me.
The outside stakes winner, multiple graded stakes place, cutting back off the third in the Lake George is Viva Vuve. She's improving. I'm a little concerned with her running style, with her post in here. Sometimes the outside post at Kentucky can be a positive, but with the both of those together in an evenly matched group, are those like little things that could just maybe impact her competitiveness late if we feel like it's going to be a group that's evenly matched? I don't like little knocks on some of the horses, like with Viva Vuve, with that running style and the outside draw.
Yeah, I will say if there were more pace in this race, this is the kind of horse that I'd be really interested in because I think that she's shown some attributes that suggest she could handle turning back to a 6.5 furlong distance. She's got that turn of foot. She wants to come from off the pace and she's got good finishing speed. It just feels like there's not enough pace in this race to set up a horse like her who really doesn't have a whole lot of speed at all. So especially breaking from the outside, they've kind of have to go back with her and try to hope some pace develops. And I don't know that it's going to.
Well, David, let's take a look at how we were going to approach this from a selections standpoint. I honestly thought after Pounce, there could be, 4 or 5 different horses all in that 5 to 1-ish range. You put one of them on top with Pipsy.
Yeah, I just think Pipsy is supposed to get a better trip in this race than she did in her prior turf sprint in North America when, like we said, she blew the start, made that big late run. I think she can be much more forwardly placed and provided a clean break in this race. I think we're going to see the best performance out of her that she's yet put forward since coming to the U.S. for trainer William Walton. I do respect Time to Dazzle. I just didn't want to take a shorter price than we got last time in the Ontario Colleen when I wasn't on her that day, and now she's going to be maybe half that price against the tougher field, but I do respect the speed of that Marcassi trainee.
Well, we have similar approaches again in here where we have Time to Dazzle in the second spot. We have Carry You underneath. We have Pounce underneath. Both of us putting hopefully a horse that we can get a little bit of value on top. I'll go with Buttercream Babe. I like that effort against the boys. 2 starts back, chased a gate to wire winner, Charlene's Dream, who's 2 for 2 on the turf. So I'll go Buttercream Babe on top. 8,392 for me, 4,329 for David. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube page right there. We wish you the best of luck on Saturday at Kentucky Downs.